Again in studio, this time about different forms of symbols, but also about bamboos. For example, in Africa there are a lot of problems, also malaria and some other problems. Some humans that have prosperity also think about what it would be possible to improve in Africa where there is the crisis entire year. But not for all people. For some users, actually, there is no crisis, and those could actually support those that have some crisis. To understand different forms of species, but also simple form of community, it's not easy, especially those under 28 years old. To understand Bambusa affinis, but also Bambusa alemtemshi, but also some other versions of bambusa. Those are some sort of bamboos. It is very simple form. It's some sort of a plant, but also classified as a cure if you use it properly, especially around your property. The property in Feng Shui are very difficult, and sometimes it's very difficult to understand that one movie could be worth $1 million. Of course, you should forget about it and you should also forget about the money. But you should actually think about what is possible to share in safe forum. To understand different forms of bamboos, it's very important, especially those that first start with bamboos and the second word would be with G or Ha. It is important not to insult yourself too much, but to some point, and share also some of your most valuable knowledge. There is over 200 simple form of bamboos, and if you imagine that there would be 200 different disease in some crisis, you might actually heal them all with bamboos. Of course, different forms of cure would be applied to different forms of community. So everyone would be not very healthy, but staying very together with life, which is very important. To understand life, it's not so easy. Sometimes it's better to understand that life sometimes take some things away. And of course, what life take away, that's some sort of philosophy or crime under American or European law if adults stolen anything. Of course, people under 15 would not be able to steal anything. And of course, that's also my design. Under 15 and the way of thinking. To understand different forms of interpretations of adults, it's not easy because those are made in millions of different ways. Of course, some ways are much more fragrance and some ways are more religious, but it's not easy to decide which one is the proper language or the proper fashion form. In me, there is not a lot of fashion because it is very important to understand that some people think about fashion as some sort of a sect. It would be like some sort of a trend in a dance or trend in some sort of strange culture. Like people have under 21. Those are very odd and strange culture. To represent those is not easy. And if you build a story, you should actually build very specific characters. Of course, the book story is similar to the movie and film, but of course, to manifest that in real life would be really hard. And probably those are only concepts, also those seen in the title or cover of the book. To understand different forms of paradoxes is not easy, but also United States of America naturalism. In nature, if malaria exists, then nature is not safe at all. quite difficult to think about the different forms of what technology did for humans if you think that there are a lot of politics and different traditions. To understand morality in technology, it's extremely difficult and complex, even for those that own some brands. To understand philosophy, of course, and concepts together with brands, it's not easy, but sometimes everything results not as $1 million, but only as $1. Thinking about $1 and what is worth $1, that's probably 1 minute of high quality movie. If we apply Tai Chi to that, of course, that $1 would mean $2, which is not easy at all. Some religions also think about God, but that's some sort of a picture or design. However, very difficult to understand those characters and what they think about false and true. To understand different forms of the picture together with Jesus or Passion of Me is not easy. But to understand different forms of classification or how someone would like to present themselves if everything in picture life would be a 100% fiction. It's not easy to understand phonetics forms of different female because those actually sometimes usually more and more pretty, ergo which lady deserve a more simple man or the one with fashion. Those ladies have some way also to build character if there is proper man next to them. But to understand the way it's not easy. Every guide or teacher might fail if you try to teach someone something. So it's more simple just to do things, whatever you wanted to do. To understand different forms of analysis, it's not easy, but also to build different forms of characters together with the Facebook story points. To understand different forms of ways is not easy, but also different forms of arousal emotions that females have in life. And that's why it's important to block them, especially if there is any crisis. If you would have sense what ladies would do when they are angry, you would block them all for entire life, for 100 years. Don't be idiot and do not believe every translation humans have in mind for my book. To understand reproduction in this world is also not easy, and without female that would not be possible. But sometimes it's also important to think about different forms of topics and markets, especially with canals around the world and different forms of passage too, and what people say in politics about some problems in this world. Also to define different forms of meanings for some forms in life. And micro Ant's Word was a program that actually was made in simple way. The micro Ant's Word was made to build better words and not the proper words. Of course, you can also use proper word, but if you put two or three strange or simple words together, you get something extra. The extra parts sometimes important, and sometimes they are just simple. Simplicity in life it's also important, but sometimes it's also important to be complex. It's not always the best to be understood by everyone. Sometimes some rare people can understand some things and other not. Keep life simple and build the symbols you like to build. Some people understand it and some not, but that's life. In life, we could not understand everything.